Hey everyone, welcome to the Illinois Daily Illini Sports broadcast. This is the last regular season game for Illinois taking on Northwestern. If they beat Northwestern, if Indiana beats Purdue, Illinois goes to the Big Ten championship with a chance to make the Rose Bowl. We got Matt Coronado, a student at Northwestern University who covers the football team. Matt, we both went to the same high school. It's good to see you, man.
It's great to see you, Carson. I'm super happy to be here, and it's a big game for Northwestern. We're 1-10 on the season, but every time that we play for the hat, everybody kind of gets up for that game. So I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, Illinois in the past with Lovie Smith, like 2019, 2020, Illinois probably expected to compete, but Northwestern ran for 400 yards. They dominated the line of scrimmage. Last year, Illinois kind of turned the tide with Brett Bielema. They won 47-14. And this year, Illinois, they're 15-point favorites. Like, on the campus feel at Northwestern, how do you guys kind of feel about this game?
I think the popular consensus right now is that this is a game that, Northwestern always kind of has a chance at winning. It's such a big rivalry game. As I was saying, playing for the hat is, I think, a big thing to not only the coaches, but I think also to the players. They take that pretty with a lot of pride. So I think all of that kind of factors in. And I think anytime that Northwestern and Illinois get together, I think it can be a close game. And you mentioned that game last year that Northwestern finally did drop that game to Illinois. They had won the previous 6 meetings. But overall, Northwestern is having a really tough go of it this season. So looking at this particular game this season, it's kind of tough to be able to be picking Northwestern necessarily. And so I think that's kind of the feel right now is that it's pretty pessimistic, but also people are trying to hope for the best.
Yeah, the first game of the year, they actually knocked off Nebraska. And I think a lot of people thought maybe, hey, is this another classic dark horse Northwestern team? What kind of happened this year? Was it a lack of playmakers at wide receiver? Was it defensive issues?
I think overall this season, it was definitely a lack of, I think, both experience and talent at the quarterback position was a big part of it. Starting the season off with Ryan Hilinski, had a great game against Nebraska, as you said, out in Ireland. And after that, injuries kind of riddled that position throughout this season. We're down to our 3rd or 4th string, depending kind of on how you look at it, with our walk-on Cole Freeman, who most likely will be getting the start today. And I think that position has always been the crux of Northwestern in terms of their ability to win these big games against Big Ten opponents. You look at 2020, the COVID season, where we got a walk-on from Indiana and Peyton Ramsey, who was able to lead us to a really good season. But again, that wasn't a player that Northwestern recruited. That was someone we got from the outside. So this has been a position that's always kind of been a problem for Northwestern, and I think that that's been the biggest reason for this downturn and this really really tough season that they've had.
You used to have guys like Clayton Thorson. That guy used to step it up big time. You'd have
Yep.
King Coulter. I mean,
Yes.
you kind of need like that dynamic quarterback, but are you guys excited about the future?
I think so. I think there's some guys in the quarterback room right now who are, they have a lot of talent, like Brendan Sullivan. He got a couple of starts this year after Ryan Hilinski went down with injury. And he looked like he was someone who had a lot of potential. He's, of course, young. He was a sophomore this year, and he had no collegiate experience before he had to come in as the backup. But in those games and in those snaps that he got against Iowa and Wisconsin, he looked like somebody who could fit into the Northwestern scheme. Typically for Northwestern, your quarterback is going to be someone who you want to be able to be pretty mobile. That's one thing that really helps out with our running attack as well. And Brendan Sullivan looks like somebody who can do that. Now, Cole Freeman also, the walk-on, he's an interesting and I think dynamic player as well. So there's a couple of guys in there who I think are interesting. And then if you look over on the defensive side, we do have a couple of guys who are going to be headed out, notably Adetomwe Adebare. He's one of the star defensive linemen for us, and he's had a great season for Northwestern. He's one of the guys who's really kept that defensive side locked down when they can. But overall, it's looking like the recruiting is going to have to get better, honestly, as these years go on in order for Northwestern to kind of get back onto the top of the pedestal.
Yeah, it's good this year though, right? For next year, isn't it top 5 in Big Ten?
I think so. The problem is they've had a couple of guys decommitting because of kind of how things have been going. But you're right. I mean, the recruiting, I think, is getting better. So that's something that is, something that we're looking forward to. Plus the fact that hopefully once the new Ryan Field is built here in, I think construction starts either next year or the year after, maybe that will be something that also starts to attract some Big Ten talent.
Yeah, dude, Illinois needs some billionaire friends for sure. I mean, that is a huge addition for the program. But, Northwestern, they kind of are playing their best ball in November. Ohio State, that was an extremely competitive game, and they pushed Purdue to the brink. What's kind of changed in the month of November from maybe September and October?
So I think those two games that you point out against Ohio State and Purdue, I think the notable thing was the defense kind of stepping up and being able to keep those two offenses in check. Of course, the Ohio State game plagued by really, really terrible weather that kind of forced Ohio State into a different game plan and scheme than they're normally used to, having to run the ball so consistently. They like to throw it with CJ Stroud, but that kind of was dampered by the rain and wind. And then against Purdue, Northwestern did a really good job of locking down Purdue in terms of the passing game. I think that was really what I think kind of did it for them against Purdue. They only let them, with 159 yards passing. And to me, that was something that they did well. They were able to keep Purdue in check that way. But for Northwestern, it's also, you have to be able to score points. And that's something that has been, difficult for the offense on a consistent basis. Because even if you hold these teams to 21 or 17 in the cases of Ohio State and Purdue, you're not going to beat them if you can't get that offense rolling in some type of way. And that's really been the biggest part of it for Northwestern, is that even as good as someone like Evan Hull is at the running back position, they're just not getting him enough carries, I don't think. That's something that I really want to see them do today against Illinois, is get Evan Hull his carries early on in the game.
Yeah. And the one thing about offense is Purdue, they're not really known for running the ball. I'd say the one struggle for Northwestern this year is stopping the run. Like Minnesota, what they run for like 300 yards.
Yes.
Illinois is going to try to run the ball with Chase Brown. What does Northwestern do? Is it just stack the box and try to make DeVito beat you over the top?
That's the thing, is that they can, Northwestern sometimes will play with a nickelback at corner. I would like to maybe see that nickelback not be on the field as much today, because we know that, like you said, Illinois is a great running team, and they're able to, pound the ball. So I think stacking the box is definitely something that Northwestern should be looking at. And then rotating in and out of those defensive linemen. We want to make sure that they're not getting, overused over the course of the game, so that they get tired out. That's been something that actually really hurt Northwestern in the Iowa game. The time of possession was a big thing. The defense was on the field for way too long in that game, and that really, I think, hampered their ability to, make that push up front with their defensive line. And so I think, in order to help out the defense, the offense needs to draw out their drives a little bit longer in terms of time of possession.
Yeah. Illinois, one of the top defenses in the conference, in the nation, let alone. I mean, Ryan Walters probably going to leave to become the head coach of, the Colorado Buffaloes. I mean, that'd be a big blow for Illinois. But, you've seen, like, everyone always thinks like Chase Brown, he should be a Heisman candidate. Well, the thing is, like, when teams stack the box, like, you can slow down Chase Brown. Like, he's not pumping out 50-yard touchdowns. It's not 60-yard touchdowns. He's a 4-yard a carry guy. So, like, people thought Purdue would be a great matchup because it doesn't have a great run defense. But the thing is, they could just limit the big play, and then they had to force DeVito to try to throw for 250 yards. It seems like both offenses for, Illinois and Northwestern, they struggle throwing the football. And that's not a winning recipe when you're trying to win in the Big Ten.
No, 100%. I think that is the biggest thing, and that Northwestern has not been able to really put together any type of passing offense other than from that Nebraska game. It hasn't really carried over to the rest of the season. And I think that's what's hurt them the most, is the fact that they've become so one-dimensional in their game plan and in their scheming, that it's very easy to plan for a team like Northwestern. And I'm sure it sounds like you've kind of experienced a similar thing with Illinois, that if your team is, known for running the ball like that, and you're able to find some way to stop that or game plan around it, then your passing offense, also it if you're not being able to lean on it as much, especially in terms of play action, if you can't get that going for your quarterback in order to kind of get them some room to operate, it becomes difficult to even, move the ball down the field at any efficient rate. And if your running back, you can't run your running back, too often. You don't want to be risking them at any, you don't want to be risking them injury or be risking them giving them too many carries in a game. But Northwestern, it's tough because they have a lot of talent, I think, at the wide receiver position. But like I said, the quarterback position, I think, is what's kind of holding them back from their passing offense really blossoming. You have guys like Malik Washington and, Donnie Navarro, even from, the transfer from Illinois. He's been good for Northwestern this year, also returning punts and kicks. But overall, they're just not getting as many opportunities to make big plays, those playmakers, at the receiver position.
One thing you expect with Northwestern, people our age, people always talk about like the 80s, 70s. Northwestern was not a good program. Well, from 1995 to, 2020, they were making bowl games consistently. And Pat
Right.
Fitzgerald always had a strong staff. I mean, you have Kevin Wilson as offensive coordinator. You'd have Mike Harwitz as defensive coordinator. Is Pat going to have to make changes this offseason?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because you look at the quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator Mike Bajakian brought in, to replace Mick McCall, who was just vehemently disliked by the fan base because of his kind of, run it, up the middle, no matter what. That was kind of his philosophy. And Bajakian has kind of taken the reins, and honestly, it not much has really changed. You saw last year, I think, that you could see that Northwestern was trying to get their offense to into a different type of game plan, into a different type of look. But unfortunately, I think that it's kind of flopped because the playmakers and the players that we have right now are not really fitting that particular scheme. I think Bajakian is a good coach, but I think that the fit right now at Northwestern is not the greatest. And when you look over at the defensive side with defensive coordinator Jim O'Neill, it's just been a rough go, I think, for him personally, because you have also, the defense has been riddled with injuries this year. AJ Hampton missed 2 months at the beginning of the season, one of the better secondary guys. Jaheim Joseph as well at safety missed a good amount of games this year. So he's been dealing with these injuries, and there definitely is talk about Pat wanting to kind of maybe clean house and bring in some new talent and new coaches to see if they can get something else brewing from Northwestern. But Pat Fitzgerald is also a guy who kind of likes to keep guys around and give them, more than a second chance. So I would be, I think, a little surprised to see both of them go, but I maybe wouldn't be too shocked if we see one new coordinator at the end of the season.
All right, well, let's play this little game. It's called Take It or Leave It. I'm going to give you some over-unders. You kind of, tell me if it's accurate or not. Northwestern, can they throw for over 130 and a half yards?
130 and a half. I think that it's tough. I mean, the weather's going to be not too bad today. It's not going to be terrible conditions for throwing. I think that it definitely has a chance of happening, but I think if it does, it's probably on a big run from somebody like Evan Hull on a screen, or from Malik Washington or something like that. Cole Freeman did not complete a pass over, I think, 15 yards against Purdue. So I think it's hard for me to say that he'll be able to go for 130 and a half. So I'm going to take the under.
All right, under. I'll probably go under 2, but Northwestern's going to need that. I mean, when Illinois loses games, Michigan State throws for 200. Purdue throws for over 200. I think Indiana threw for like 330 yards. You probably have to have two-dimensional in the offensive category. Chase Brown, 149 yards or under.
That's interesting. I think that he definitely can get up there very close to 149, but I think at the same time, Northwestern's defense, I think, can keep him under 149. Now you look at, of course, like Mo Ibrahim against or for Minnesota against Northwestern, he was really able to run all over us. So, maybe thinking about it, I think I might take the over on that, to be honest. I think that he might have a chance to go for 150 today.
All right. Like against Purdue, like did the Boilermakers get any action in the running game or was it all O'Connell?
For the most part, I think they did get a good amount of action in the run game. It wasn't anything ridiculous. I'm just re-looking over that stat real quick. They kind of have a running back by committee for Purdue, and they were able to rush for over 100 yards. So yeah, it is definitely a part of that action for Purdue.
All right. Evan Hall, does he break the century mark?
Evan Hall for the century mark. I think, last game of the season against Illinois, he always typically does get up for these games. I think I would take the over on that, actually. I like Evan Hall. I think they'll keep it on the ground today to kind of keep Cole Freeman out of harm's way. He had 3 turnovers in that game against Purdue, 2 fumbles and an interception. So I'll take the over on that.
Yeah. He's a stud dude. He's a two-way player. I mean, he's been pretty productive in the passing game for Northwestern.
Oh, 100%. I believe last time I checked, he was our second leading receiver behind in receptions behind Malik Washington. So he's totally active in the pass game as well as the rush game. Overall, he's just our star athlete on the team.
Yeah. All right. Northwestern. I'm not trying to like sound like a jerk, but like over under 14 points.
No, it's definitely a fair question. That's not at all out of pocket, I don't think, because Northwestern has had difficulty scoring 14 points this year. It's not something that's been a given. But I think today I'm kind of thinking about what this game is going to look like. I think it's going to be pretty down and dirty. It's going to be a
3 yards in a cloud of dust. I mean, both teams are going to try to establish the run.
I think that's really what it's going to be. I think it'll be a defensive battle for the most part. But for 14 points, I think Illinois probably is going to be in the 20s somewhere. But I do think that Northwestern can break over 14. So I'll give them the over.
All right. Here's a question. Malik Washington, is he kind of the X factor for Northwestern? Kind of get like that threat on the outside.
Yes, I think that's a really good way to put it, honestly, because Malik, he's a little bit inconsistent, but also he doesn't get the targets that he really needs. I think he's the guy who we should be looking at the most. Bryce Kurtz is another guy who is, he's solid for Northwestern, and the tight ends too can get in there with the passing game. But Malik Washington is, the number 1 receiver and should be getting the targets. So yeah, I would agree with that.
All right. So the spread's 15. Illinois is a 15-point favorite. What are you betting?
If I was having to bet on a 15 point favorite Illinois, I'm probably going to go ahead and I think I'm going to take Northwestern in that, honestly. I'm obviously, with you. Obviously a little bit of a bias there, but I think looking at you pointed out how Northwestern has played in the past couple of games, maybe taking out Minnesota. But otherwise they've kept their couple of last games close, Maryland, Ohio State, granted the weather, and Purdue. So I think that might be a little too much for me to take Illinois, even though I do definitely think that if I was betting on the money line itself, I would probably take Illinois, but in the spread, I would have to take Northwestern.
We're like, as college fans, like Illinois is always trying to look for like that big rival. You want Iowa, you want Wisconsin. Northwestern is the biggest rival, but like on campus in Evanston, does anybody wake up and they're like, man, I really want to beat Brett Bielema. Man, I really want to beat Illinois. I mean, that's the issue. I feel like in the Big Ten, you got Ohio State, Michigan. You got Michigan State, Michigan.
Right.
I feel like everybody else is playing second fiddle. Like, how do these two programs like create an entertaining game every year? I just feel like there's not really hatred. I feel like they respect each other, but it's like, where's the extra juice?
Well, I think that part of it is that they, at least in the recent history, both teams haven't been, at the top of their games when they met each other. I think that if, you take, Illinois season this year, which has been, very impressive, they, giving Michigan a huge run for their money and looking like they were leading the Big Ten West at the beginning of the season and still having a chance to win the Big Ten West this year. And if you pit them maybe against, 2020 Northwestern or 2018, 2017, I think this game would have a lot more media coverage and a lot more hype around it. And I think that's going to be kind of the pathway to making this rivalry even bigger for both schools, is getting both teams at the end of the season with strong records, both trying to be bowl eligible teams. Northwestern not this year, but that I think is the pathway to making this rivalry, bigger for both schools.
Well, I also think like both schools, you kind of have to think like a capitalist. You kind of have to always improve, because Nebraska just got Matt Rule. That's going to change the game. You got USC, you got UCLA coming in with, great passing offenses. Both these programs are stuck in 1985 sometimes.
Yes.
It's like Illinois hires Barry Lunny, but when they need 10 yards, they just run the ball up, up the middle of Chase Brown. That's why they lost to Michigan. They were 1 for 6 on, 4th downs against Michigan State. I just don't understand why coaches don't transition to a full spread offense. Like Nick Saban did it at Alabama. LSU did it, with Joe Burrow. I don't know. It's like you're handcuffing yourself for no reason.
I think that it's probably just because, at least for Northwestern, it's that they don't have necessarily a talent to be able to do so. I think that if Pat Fitzgerald had guys who he think could run a full spread offense, granted, I think it would take
they did, though.
It would take some convincing maybe from his offensive coordinator. But if he did have that type of guy, those type of guys, particularly, I mean, at the quarterback position, I think then he would look at it. But at the same time, like you said, these are kind of programs who are, set in their ways, how they want to be. And so that's just kind of how it is. And hopefully things can change at some point, because I think you're right. In order to be competitive in the Big Ten nowadays, that's kind of the type of offense that you need to run and the type of team that you need to be. But at the same time, you've seen teams like Northwestern run a very similar type offense and be successful with it. Granted, when the Big Ten West, I think, was a lot worse in 2020, but I think you're right. I think those high spread offenses need to kind of come in to both of these schools.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you know what, Matt, thanks for coming on, and you're driving up to Evanston. It's your last game covering as a college student. How do you feel?
I've kind of just looking back on everything that I've done for the football team over the 4 years. I've had a really great time with it, gotten to travel with the team a couple of times and to call it for the student radio. So I'm just excited to kind of take it in. I don't have I don't have too many negative thoughts that I'm trying to keep out today. So I'm just trying to kind of be positive about it, optimistic, and have a good time with it today. And thanks so much for having me on too.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's going to do it. So Illinois, Northwestern, Rose Bowl on the line. I don't think a lot of Illinois fans thought that was a possibility a couple months ago. It's been a good season for Illinois. And hey, I'm pulling for Northwestern. I mean, we need every team in the Big Ten to step it up. And obviously, Pat Fitzgerald has a pretty good track record.
Yeah, love Pat Fitzgerald. That's one guy who I'll never fall off the horse for. I love Pat.
Go Cats. That's what he always says. All right, well, that's going to do it. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks so much.